All right, what's up, everyone? This is Ryan here, and we are back for episode 9 of my live stream Q&A series. So unfortunately, I do have some couple announcements and some fun things to talk about, but uh, we'll get to one of the announcements, which was the reason why I'm saying this. But normally, what I like to do now is I like to try and open the episodes with kind of one long sort of lesson or one long question that I get. But unfortunately, between not getting really any questions this week and also the fact that I've had so little spare time to begin with, and I've been working on something cool, which I'll announce in a minute. This is going to be a more laid back conversational. We're just going to see where this one goes because I just don't really didn't have a lot of time to prepare. However, in a moment, I will get to why my time was just sort of forcibly spent elsewhere. But before we get to that, I would just like to thank. Where was his name? Let's see here. I actually, unfortunately, am doing this before he even told me whether he wants his name read out. But I would like to just thank Trevor H. For supporting me on Patreon. I'm up to 4 supporters right now, which is something that I'm quite excited about. 4 patrons, rather. And that's super cool because I'm already approaching a point where I can purchase some new equipment. So thank you so much, Trevor. I greatly appreciate your support and all the other patrons on Patreon and blah, blah, blah. That's our daily commercial. And what we'll do now is I'm just going to check the comments really quick. Damn, we got some people already. We got Chitan, Slifer, Dali, and I'm going to try and pronounce Abd El Raouf, perhaps. Thank you for joining me again. So, I don't have a lot of questions prepared, people. So, today, of all days, do me a favor, help me out, ask some good questions, and we'll see what we can do. But before I get into questions, I do want to talk a little bit about my experience with life cycle excuse me, view model, life cycle, and live data, which are basically part of Android's. If you've kept up at all with Android I/O 2017, they released this thing called Android Architecture Components. And the main parts of that, well, let me just hop into the code lab and we can look a little bit about that. Look at that a little bit. Oh, yeah. It's going to take a minute for my brain to warm up here. So what you can do is, if you are curious about learning Android architecture components, and I'll show you a demo of what those are in just a moment. What I would strongly suggest to you, this is what I did. If you haven't noticed this before, this is a really, really cool thing. So Google does these code lab things, and I won't actually open the thing up in my browser, but I'll show you the actual project. So if you want to learn about these things, Android architecture components, some of them, then what you can do is I would strongly suggest hop over to this code lab. It'll take you, I'd say, probably 1 to 4 hours to get through and fully absorb this thing, but let me just show you really quickly what it looks like. And just bear in mind, this code is from the code lab. This is not my own code, but it is, of course, under the Apache license, so that's why I'm sharing it with you here. And basically what the code lab demonstrates is just a couple different things, but mainly it demonstrates the usage of, for starters, excuse me. Sorry about that, I've got, my throat's a little irritated. But it demonstrates the usage of this view model object, these live data objects. There's a couple different types, and of most sort of interest to me, it demonstrates the life cycle. Where is that? Let me see if I can find that really quickly. It demonstrates the Android life cycle thing. Let's see if I can find a good example here. Chrono activity. Come on, give me a friggin' life cycle. Okay, here we go. This is the life cycle stuff. So basically, how the lifecycle thing works is just really quickly. You can now. Big disclaimer here. This stuff is still under development. I am not giving you a lesson right now. I'm sharing you something that I've played around with that is also under development. So just a really quick heads up. If you're watching this video months after architecture components was released, this might not be current information. And again, I'm not giving you a lesson, but here we go. So so far what you can do is they've given us this lifecycle activity class. There is also I did see that there was a lifecycle fragment class, but I don't think that's going to continue to be used, but I'm not entirely sure. But anyways, how this thing works is we've got our lifecycle activity. And so what this does is the big takeaway here is we now have this thing I believe called can I say lifecycle? I forget. Lifecycle owner. There's a couple different things going on. Now again, I'm just showing you some crap, but what you can do is you can give fragments and activities and possibly other things a life cycle. It works different, but let's just stick with activities. That's easier. So I can give this activity a life cycle by saying extends life cycle activity. And then what I could do, let me head out of, I'm going to hop out of this code lab here and we'll put that to rest. Actually, I think I'll open up my, the stream might lag just for a moment. 1 second. Okay, and hopefully we're back. So what I'll do now is I'm going to hop into Pause Trainer, which is of course available in the links down below. So what I've been doing with Pause Trainer, a couple things. I've been babbling about this endlessly, but I am implementing it with clean architecture. But more relevant to this discussion is, and I'm still working on this, but I've made my presenter a lifecycle observer. I've made a couple changes in Pause Trainer. And this is something I wanted to revisit from the last episode, because in the previous episode, I was talking about how I used to inject reminder list activity. I used to inject my presenters into my activities, and I've actually once again changed that approach. And so it's funny, like if you go back to, the previous episode, I believe, or maybe the one before, I don't know, and I don't care, but basically what happened was someone asked me, like, why was I injecting my presenters into my activities instead of into my fragments, which is what I was doing like 3 months ago. If you're a beginner, just ignore this stuff. It's just Dagger 2 crap. We'll get to more basic stuff later. And basically, the gist of my answer in the previous thing was that, well, you know, I don't really like having, I have to call the activity anyway, and I'm treating my activity like a container and blah, blah, blah. And the thing about it is that the issue is when you get sort of this deep into Dagger 2 and software architecture, it's very hard to just flat out say X approach is wrong, B approach is right, because we're out of black and white territory here. However, what I found is that I managed to move my presenter back into the fragment, inject it back in there. Oh, thank you for the update, YouTube. Sorry. I should turn off Windows. Oh, whatever. So anyways, how I had this before is I had this line here, these lines, inject reminder list presenter. I was injecting it into the activity. And then I also had this code in the activity as well. And the reason why I did that was a couple things, but the main thing is I just thought, well, I have to call get activity anyway, which I don't hate doing that, but I don't really like doing that either. Blah, blah, blah. It doesn't really matter. Longer story shorter, what I found is that now that I've got, now that I'm injecting the presenter into my fragment, which has set retain instance to true, which means that on orientation changes and things like that, this fragment state, the state, not the view, but the state will be maintained on orientation and things like that. It does still call on create view. When you rotate the phone, if you have it set to set retain instance, it will still redraw the view. But for example, if I were to have some kind of state in here like this presenter, those instances will be maintained when you switch the phone. And I actually tested this by opening up the debugger and rotating the phone a whole bunch and seeing if this was the same instance of the presenter and all that stuff. So that's that. So I'm now injecting the presenter into the fragment. It's working beautifully well with orientation changes so far. And to get back to view model and life cycle, I've made the presenter a life cycle observer. And what I'll be doing, I'm not sure if I've set it up yet. This is still a work in progress. But what I would like to do is I want this reminder list presenter to be observing the life cycle of the fragment. And the way that this life cycle thing works is after you slap in this life cycle observer thing, and somewhere you have to set it, I'm sure. I haven't set that up yet. But once that's ready, it gives us access to all these different annotations we can use, which are these on lifecycle event annotations. So for example, when the model view presenter thing, the cluster starts, which is signaled by our fragments on start, that annotation should get fired. And then it will, of course, call get reminders, and all that does is it fetches data, and then it'll set the view model. I'm still implementing this view model, but let's open that up really quickly. Reminder list view model. And yeah, I won't talk a lot about this because I'm still understanding it myself, but I've got a mutable live data set up. So this will basically be where I store, this is my view model basically. And so what that's kind of allowing me to do is I'm getting really, really close to my, my architecture, which I've been trying to build for a long time. So I'll jump to questions in a moment. I've just got one last thing I'd like to talk about, and then we will get to that stuff. But let me just find an image here. Just to maintain my tradition of griping about Windows 10, I find it really irritating how if I type in the search bar pictures, all it does is show me the Photos Windows app, which I really don't want to open. I just want to go to my pictures. So that's my daily rant about Windows. All right, where is that thing? Where is my marble machine? There we go. All right. And so anyways, just to wrap that whole diatribe up, what I've been doing is I've been trying to implement this architecture diagram, which I drew about a month ago, something like that. And kind of the last, there was a couple final pieces to the puzzle, but one of the main ones was this view model object, because I believe how I had it before. Oh, sorry, am I in? Oh, I'm actually, wow, I actually remember to switch from code. Basically, I didn't really have a proper decoupled view model object. I think I was storing the state either in the presenter or the view for my view model stuff. So I'm happy to have that decoupled in a different class, and I'm excited to see kind of how that works and fits into my tests and all that stuff. Anyways, the last thing, and this is a big announcement. So one of my huge goals for July is to build, actually, where do I have it in here? So I was working on this project. Let me just find in my filing system. It's a bad filing system. Holy crap, where is it? I will find it eventually. Okay, here we go. Almost, oh, it's over here, of course. Okay, so unfortunately I spilled some water on this. All right, so a little while ago you probably heard me explain that I was going to be building this app called Forgettery. And how that was going to work is that I was going to build the app's front end, and then what I was going to do is I was going to build it with multiple different backends. Like I was going to do it with an SQL thing, Realm, possibly Firebase, Retrofit, just a whole bunch of different backends with one application front end. And I was going to demonstrate how you can do that, because it's actually, if you build your application in an intelligent and decoupled way and you follow good principles, it's actually very easy to do that. Basically, and what I mean by that, I mean very specifically, again, to pull that diagram up, you can have this, the whole rest of the app, that layer and that layer, talk to different services. Whoops. So it could be Realm, it could be Firebase, it could be question mark, question mark, question mark. It could be the ambulance sirens driving by outside my window because I live in the hood. I'm sorry. But I do live in the hood of Victoria. Worst neighborhood. Anyways, yeah. So what I was going to do is I was going to build that Forgettery app. Now the thing about it, I realized two things. Number one, I'm already implementing this architecture in Pause Trainer. That's what I've been doing for the past month or so, is trying to get it to work. Secondly, I don't have time to build another application. I've got so many projects going on. I'm trying to get Pause Trainer to work. I've got the Recycler View thing to do. I've got an ebook I'm writing. I'm interested in this other project with some of my friends from the Slack group, blah, blah, blah. What I am going to do is, instead of building Forgettery now, I would like to do that eventually, but it's going to become a different thing. What I'm going to do instead is, once Pause Trainer is built properly, then I will build it with multiple different backends. Because basically, a couple days ago I realized, why the hell wouldn't I do that? So that's my big announcement. Pause Trainer, which was the repo I showed you earlier, will be built using my architecture. This is a clean architecture which uses Model View Presenter Passive View, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to build that, and then I will build it with multiple different backends, and that'll be my big sort of, not my big, but just a medium-sized app which has multiple backends, and I'm super excited about it. I think we're going to have fun. That's all. I'm going to shut up for a minute, and let's look at some comments and questions. All right. Abdo. I'm just learning Abdo. I'm learning I've got a Mr. Sabri, I will call him. It is, of course, it's I'm excited to learn how to pronounce names from all kinds of different cultures, but there's a lot of different ways, and there's a lot of different cultures and a lot of different names, so it's a work in progress, but I'm working, so Abdo I will call you. Anyways, so a couple different things. We've got a Cyrillic name, which I unfortunately can't read, but he or she stops by to say that this person saw my Recycler View lessons and it helped a lot, and thank you, and you're very welcome for that. Abdo is asking, is the architecture, so here's a question. Is this architecture model view presenter? This is actually a really good question. I can make this into a good question. Let's work that into clean architecture and stuff. So just 1 second. El Raouf. Okay, cool. All right, so Abdo asks, so was the architecture diagram I showed earlier model view presenter? Just out of curiosity's sake, if there's any beginners watching, does everyone know what model view presenter is? Because if you don't know what model view presenter and all that crap I was showing you, I'd be happy to take any beginners through that today. So once again, I'm just going to pull up the diagram just because it's the digital version. I should really name it something, and then I wouldn't have to wrestle with the Windows 10 user interface here. Okay, here we go. So two things. So the question was the architecture diagram I showed earlier model view presenter? So yes, but when I think of model view presenter in the context of clean architecture, I'm really only thinking of sort of the front end. So what I mean by that is, for example, you'll notice here, I say that this UI layer is passive view, and you'll notice it says model view presenter just in this area. This is a whole little domain layer. And then we've got, of course, the service layer with data and stuff like that. Oh, this thing's janky. Here we go. So hopefully that whole thing's in there. What? Why did... Ah! Windows 10! Stop it! Sorry, I apologize. Okay. So yes, this part is model view presenter. I only think of... So you can kind of just have... Here's the big problem. Here's the big problem with model view presenter, model view controller, model view, view model, model this, model that, clean architecture, this, that. So a big problem is that we've got we've got a whole bunch of different developers using these terms and their subterms like model or view or presenter. View and presenter are fairly unambiguous, but model is very ambiguous, and everyone uses kind of different interpretations and definitions. So the thing is, under some interpretations of model view presenter or even model view controller, I'm just going to say a 3-layer architecture. Under certain interpretations of that, some people would actually consider this to be like view and presenter, and then model would just be like everything down here. Now this is clean architecture, so it's a little different, but if you kind of just take this whole layer out, this domain layer, or the interactor, or use case layer, or whichever of the 3 words you want to use, if you do that, then some people would look at that like presenter and view, and then this layer down here, oh, this is annoying. This layer down here would be the model. I don't really think that's correct. So I would say, absolutely. So very specifically, here's the thing. Okay, for the UI layer of my clean architecture apps, I use model view presenter passive view. So you can look up Martin Fowler MVP passive view. And this is a subset. So Martin Fowler is a developer who is really, really amazingly good at what he does, and he's a great teacher. And he sort of divided Model View Presenter up into two sort of distinct variations. One of them being passive view. I'm not going to explain the whole thing, but just the basic idea with passive view is that you keep your view, which in my case is my fragment, really dumb. So what that looks like in code is in Pause Trainer, which does apply this architecture as best as I can. If I go to a view in here, so for example, reminder list fragment, how passive view kind of works in my interpretation, I'm guilty of reinterpreting things myself and misunderstanding, but basically how that works is ideally this view does not make decisions. Everything it does is because the presenter told it to do that. And the thing is, why would you do that? The reason why you might want to do that is because if you keep your view really, really dumb, you don't need to test it that much. If you keep it dumb and simple, you don't need to test it that much. Should you test it? Yeah. Do you need to spend a lot of time doing it? I don't think you should. So to answer the question, to wrap the question up, I do use Model View Presenter. That is what the diagram I was showing. It does use Model View Presenter up here. However, this whole thing, I would call that like a clean architecture which uses Model View Presenter and a dagger too for dependency injection. If you wanted to get like really broad and use lots of big words. So hopefully that kind of answers your question, and I highly suggest people check out Martin Fowler's blog, because that guy is an old school pro. All right, if you've enjoyed the show so far, you can do me a favor and hit the like button down below, or you don't have to if you don't feel like it. Whatever, man. Anyways, I'm just going to run a quick commercial break, and we'll get to some more questions. Okay. So what do we got here? Okay, so I'm just reading through the comments, and it's funny because like I'm seeing the confusion and the ambiguity between Model View Presenter and Model View View Model already popping up, and it's funny because like, so people are super excited about Model View View Model. And people are like, what is it? And to the best of my knowledge, the only thing that I read about I tried to understand how is Model View View Model different from Model View Presenter, because ultimately it appears that even if you apply Model View View Model, it looks like you will probably still want a controller talking to use cases and the data layer. Although I don't know, I'm not saying that as fact. And so it's almost like what we're working towards is model, view, controller, view model. You see, I don't like that they called model, view, view model. I don't like that they called it that, because like view model, I wouldn't assume that a view model makes any decisions, and I don't know if it should. I would still have a controller or presenter or whichever friggin' word you want to use, a decision maker, a logic thing. I would still have that in a model view model, but I haven't implemented model view model, so I don't actually know. But anyways, it's just funny to see the ambiguity in all the naming and interpretations and stuff. Anyways, a little aside there. So let's see. I've got a question from Ivan about espresso. Unfortunately, I have not. Espresso has been on my list of things to do, but between I keep my user interfaces very simple, and B, um, so far, and B, because I use passive view, I haven't done espresso testing, so I can't really answer any questions on that. But I do want to get into that, especially when I start adding animations to Pos Trainer. But for now, I can't really help you with espresso, unfortunately. Um, let's see. Yeah. Oh, great. So now I'm hearing from Chitan that model view presenter and a view model is by some interpretation a new architecture. We have to get away from all these, like, geez. There's too many different interpretations of everything. Okay. So what do we got here? Just do it. Yeah. Yeah, Ryan's going Super Saiyan. That's I'm going Super Saiyan on architecture. That's true. Yeah, Daryl's running into the same thing because he's trying to figure out if he's going to merge model view presenter or view presenter and view model, since he's also using lifecycle. Really, the thing that I'm starting to see is that our architectures, we're being given so many amazing tools to build our architectures, which I really have to hand it to Google and all of our third-party API builders, Square, JetBrains, I believe, all those good ones. We have so many different options that we have so much freedom in architecture, and to be perfectly honest, I almost want to get away from. I don't even think of this as model view presenter anymore, to be honest. I just, I see necessity for these different boxes, but there's just so much ambiguity when it comes to it that I don't even like all these different names anymore. All right, let's see if I can get to a question here. So I've got a question from Shantanu, who's saying that he followed my recycler view tutorial, and he's got an error while running the application. It's just crashing. How can you figure out the error? So, one sec here. And we've got a question from Mr. Bidwell. So what I'll do is, I've got a couple. So first off, I'm just going to answer Mr. Barthew's question, just because it's really quick. He's just asking, sorry, I mixed up, Mr. Merthan. He's asking if I'm going to do a video on draggable recycler view items. Excuse me. I will include all kinds of recycler view crap in the next part, which will be part 3 of my new recycler view tutorial. So I have to just let a few people know here. please watch my new recycler view tutorial. Don't watch the old videos. I've really written it everywhere to like, please watch the new one. I know it's only a basic recycler view. I will build the more complicated one in part 2. The older videos are deprecated. Anyways, back to questions. So here, let's see here. So, all right, I'm just going to copy the whole question in here, and we'll get to this. So, let's see, Shantanu. So Shantanu is asking or saying, asking/saying. There it goes. There goes the voice crack. I swear I'm 23. Okay, so Shantanu is saying, so he's followed my recycler view tutorial, and at the end he's got an error while running the application. It's just crashing. How can he figure out the error? So the thing about this question, the thing that you need to understand, so I will give you some practical tips here, but the most important thing I want to communicate is I'm very happy to help you, but if you need help with specific crashes, you need to provide me with more information. So you're basically, you're saying, how can I, but maybe you're asking the more general question, but just for beginners, I get this a lot. I get people saying, hey, your tutorial crashed. What's wrong? Well, and I'm not saying you are asking it like that, Shantanu, just a general thing, but the thing about this is, like, if you don't tell me a line number, if you don't tell me which class it's crashing in, if you don't tell me anything, I can't help you, because it's like saying, I'm trying to think of a good analogy. It's like saying, my car won't start. Can you fix it? What's wrong with it? So now let me tell you how to get a bit more information. So how do you get this information to me / yourself / I'll say, or how do you go about solving this problem? So the first thing is, I have lots of content where I solve problems live on camera with the debugger, with unit tests, by just going through, by testing it on devices. Search my channel. I have hours of footage of me solving real bugs live. So that's one thing I'm pretty proud of myself, is that unlike a lot of other people that do this, I actually take you through the whole process. So anyways, let's think practically for a minute here. So how do you go about solving this problem? So the problem is, we've got a crash. How do we figure out, oh, you're asking how do you figure out the error? So Shantanu is asking this properly, and I went off on a tangent and assumed he was, yeah, anyways, let's do this. So how do you figure out the error in a crash? Well, I'm going to keep this really brief because, like I say, I have hours of content, but really, really quickly, there's a couple different ways. So what I'll do is, what's a good application I can use to test this? Okay, I'm going to open up, let's do the recycler view pre-build. Yeah, let's do that. So when I open up a project, it's going to lag a little bit, so I'm going to not talk for a moment. Whoa. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the source of this application a tiny bit. I'm going to make one little change, and then I'm going to deploy it to this application. It's going to give me an error. I'm going to show you how to view the error and how to interpret it. And the thing about this is you will get scenarios where you're not necessarily going to get a very good error message. It really depends, especially like, I'm not an expert in this, but I think if you use Java reflection, which to be honest, I don't even really know what reflection is. I've never worked with it. And just if you use certain things, it can be really hard to get these error messages, but let's just do this really quickly. Famous last words by Ryan, really quickly, and then I go off on 20-minute tangents, but I think that's why a lot of people like watching me. Okay, so what I'm going to do, and this is a very, very common error. So I am going to say activity list. So this is the change I'm making. Actually, I'll say layout. All right, so the error I'm going to be making, and this is something that I've made this mistake as a beginner a lot, is when you're busy copy and pasting code, sometimes you forget to, for example, inflate the wrong layout. So this activity is called detail activity. I've changed it so that it's inflating activity list. Let's see what happens, bearing in mind that I'm not sure if this thing's going to lag a little bit. We will see. All right, so I'm going to run it. And I'm going to select my phone. And I'm going to open up the Android monitor. So this is your output log. This is where you will see if errors occurred. This is where you will see it. Make sure you've got your device selected. Sometimes it's not. And as you can see, we are connected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the phone up. If it will let me. Apparently, yeah, great. Thank you. Okay. So I've got the application just showing the list. I'm going to push a button. It's going to crash. We'll then hop into the output log to see the crash. See, stopped working. And let's look at the output log. Okay, okay, it's a little buggy sometimes. Why is it not outputting? See, here's the unfortunately, would you see that? I'm going to just try redeploying it, and I'll see if that allows me to view the error log. This is like the best failed demo ever. What the hell is this Firebase shit? This thing's not connected to Firebase. Would you just give me the error message, you piece of shit? All right, I'm sorry. All right, let's try something else. This is the best friggin' failed demo ever. I was all happy with myself. I'm like, oh yeah, this will be a good demo, and then it's just not even giving me the friggin' error log for reasons I'm unaware. Let's try activity detail. Let's try just launching it wrong. Why? Okay, I don't understand this. Does anyone in the chat know why it's just not outputting the logs for me? Like, I really don't understand that. This is the thing about doing this stuff live, is that, you know, I've got my demo set up. I'm trying to show you what happens when an application crashes. And unfortunately for me, it just does not want to output the error log. I don't know why. Maybe I am doing something wrong here. Let's check the... I'm just going to check the... Oh, did I have something in the filter? I don't have anything in the filter. Oh, what? Oh, there. Thank you so much. Who was that? I did. Daryl, thank you so much. Okay. So here was what the issue was, and I really appreciate that. So this thing, I don't recall setting this, but this was set to Firebase. So great. We're going to set this to no filters. Make sure this thing is clear as well. You don't want writing in there. And then let's continue with this demo. All right. Thank you, Daryl. I was like really bugged out about that, as you can tell. Okay, let's go back to the original thing. So I'm going to set this to list. We're going to redeploy the app. Let's do this whole thing over again. And yeah. That's live TV for you, live casting. Okay, so once again, I'm going to push an item. It's going to crash. We're going to hop into this thing, Android monitor, making sure that it hasn't randomly set it to a Firebase filter. Here we are. This is what I want to see. All right, so how do you find the crash? How do you read sort of these long-ass error log messages here? So the first thing is, so the first thing you're going to want to look for is, of course, like the fatal exception. This is telling you this thing crashed and the whole application quit. And it's telling me that it happened in my app. See if I can zoom in even more. So the way that you kind of read these things is you kind of read it like most of the time top down. So usually, excuse me. So usually like it'll give you, usually it'll give you a line. It'll say like it crashed at this line. So kind of the top blue highlighted line, which we won't really see here, is kind of where you want to look because that should be the origin of the crash. How do I read this one here? It's saying unable to start activity. That's the important thing. And it is going to give us, I'll zoom out a little. I hope you can still see that fairly clearly. So it's saying up here, it's going to say unable to start the activity. The activity didn't start. Null pointer exception. And this is key. It's saying null pointer exception. Attempt to blah, blah, blah. So what it's saying is when this was called, it was called on an object which does not exist or has not been assigned. But basically what that means is it doesn't exist. It's sending mail to an address that doesn't exist. And then it's, if you scroll kind of down, it gives us this caused by. Now, obviously, like if you've looked at any number of error logs, they change a lot. They're not always going to be super specific. They're not always going to give you good information. In this case, I picked an error which was easy to decipher, but sometimes you're not going to get the best feedback. So it's telling me caused by, and it says null pointer exception, blah, blah, blah. And then it's going to give me, and this is usually highlighted in blue, the line where it crashed. So if I click on this, it should take me right to that line up here, which it did. And it's saying, so if I'm reading this, I would read this as date and time was null when I tried to set its text, and it's telling me that. It's telling me right here when I called set text on this object, it was null. So that's the main thing here. So I'm looking at that, I'm saying it's null. So I'm going to pretend for a moment that I don't automatically know what the issue is. But here's what I'm going to do next. So if you're asking someone a question, like a support question, you're going to want to include the error, and if you can, include your source code, and if you can, include the line it crashed on. Give people who are helping you as much information as possible. And then, so what I'm going to do from there, so I've got this information. I know this thing is null, and that's what I have to work with. Then I'm going to say, okay, am I in code? Yep. Why is it null? Why might it be null? Now, just by experience, the first thing I would do is I would look up here. I would say, okay, this looks pretty normal. This is how I always assign these, create these member variables. I am calling find view by ID. It's not telling me that it's the wrong ID. What might the error be next? Well, just by experience and copy and pasting and running into this error a lot, I would assume if I get a null pointer exception and I don't see any clear issue in the code to bind it to the view, I'm going to assume it's the wrong layout. So of course I'm going to hit activity list, or no, activity detail. I'm going to rerun the app. And then I'm going to do the same thing, and it's not crashing. So that was a super condensed version of how to figure out the crash. Now, for Shantanu, maybe you're not even getting an error log. Sometimes that happens. But yeah, just so that would be my general process for figuring out crashes, and hopefully that was helpful. Let's hop back into the comments here. Okay. So Mr. Bidwell has a question. All right. And I'm just going to copy and paste that in. And this is a question about the card view. So does a card view stem from a recycler view, or is it a completely separate piece of development? So what's the relationship between card view and recycler view? So recycler view is, of course, a view, not compound. I'll just say a view which is designed to display large repetitive data sets. So basically, the basic gist there. Sorry, one sec. Go away. Sorry, I'm getting hammered by notifications from Slack because I was a goof and I forgot to turn on. There we go. Okay, so sorry, totally sidetracked there. So card view is separate. Card view is just a view which can be put into a recycler view. It can be used as a recycler view item. But card view can also be used for dialogues. It can be used for really whatever you want that you think is appropriate. So it is separate. But it can be used with and to great effect with a recycler view. Really just think of card view as like a compound view, basically, that you have a lot of control over. That's how I would think of it. What else have we got? So the Barthew is asking how we can do a connection with an SQL database hosted in an internet server. So you see, I'm not super qualified to answer that because I've only approached that. I'm really not the authority on that, but what I would do is, yeah, I don't really know. It's weird because I'm used to talking to remote servers through REST and JSON. I don't know how the best way to do that through SQL would be. But you're asking, should it be a singleton? I think just as a matter of just pure pragmatics, you don't want a database. You don't want multiple instances of one database with multiple calls to each instance. You do want to set up some kind of, I believe the term is synchronized calls to the database. Now, how you would do that depends on your API stack, your preferences. Like you could make the database a singleton. You could make the thing that talks to the database a singleton in effect. Unfortunately I can't really give you a good answer on that because it's a huge question that could be approached multiple ways. But I will say the one thing I will say is, I don't think in my uneducated opinion, I don't think you ever want multiple instances of the same database with calls going, because that's when you can get SQL database locked exceptions and crap like that. Not the best answer there, but hopefully that helps you a little bit. Utsav has, he's asking what I think about, so what do I think about Kotlin and should beginners start to learn it? I actually have addressed this topic in a previous episode, so I'll just direct you to, I think it's about episode 5. I also have a standalone video on my channel, which is titled, Should Beginners Learn Kotlin and stuff like that. So if you'd like to hear my input on that, you can go check out that video. Just in a well, actually no, just go watch the video. I've kind of gone over that a number of times now. Good question though. Let's see. I'm asked if I've heard about 42 University. I have no idea what that is, and I have no opinions on it then. All right, so what I'm going to do, we're about at the hour mark. I'm going to take a quick commercial break. Just once again, quick reminder, if you haven't already, you can do me a favor if you hit the like button down below. I'm going to pretty much only answer one more question. And then I'll call it a day for today just because I've got such a busy friggin' day today. I kind of had this realization a little while that I don't really get days off, even on my days off, but that's totally fine because I was gonna say I love what I do. I love this wise ass thing and I love coding. My day job I don't love that, but I do it because I have to and because I have to. So stop whining and get your work done, Ryan. So anyways, yeah, if there's any more questions, if you have some more conversational general questions too, I don't mind answering that at the end of the episode. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to run one more commercial break and I'll come back in a couple minutes and answer maybe one more question and that'll be that. All right. Shantanu says, thank you for my tutorials. You're very welcome, Shantanu. I'm glad they are of use to you. Yeah. Abdo is saying that if he presses the like again, it will unlike the video. But may I remind you that I did say, if you haven't already... Abdo, may I ask which country you are from? You mentioned that you are Arabic, of course. I'm not sure how general this greeting is, but I remember trying to learn how to say hello in Arabic. I think it was I could be totally mistaken on this, but I think it was marhaba. I think there was also I don't remember how to say that correct. Salam alaikum, or I'm not entirely sure, but Arabic is it's an interesting language. Very interesting. It seems like it would be really hard to learn how to write Arabic, especially for me, because I was born with hand tremors. So this is a good day, but my hands always shake a little bit. So when I'm writing, unless I write really slowly, my writing is awful. And amusingly enough, my signature is always a little bit different because of the shakes. It kind of takes the point out of it almost. Anyways, let's see if we've got any more. Oh, he's from Egypt. Ah, feast after Ramadan. Marhaba. Good, I did that. Salam alaikum. You see, I don't find it... Sorry, people are probably wondering, like, what the hell I'm talking about. I'm just chatting about random stuff because I have no technical questions and I'm about to quit the stream. But I like to end the episode with a little bit of off-topic banter, so if that's an issue, then go cry about it. It is. Abdo saying Arabic is not difficult at all. I don't know. I think it's pretty high. Like, I'll admit, English is ridiculous. I'll end on this, but just as an anecdotal experience. So, one thing that I really love, and part of the reason why I love asking people where they're from, and I love learning different names and languages and all that stuff, is where I grew up, which is Canada. We are a very, very multicultural country, especially the area I live in. And in my high school, there was a ton of exchange students. And one of those exchange students actually became a very, very good friend of mine, who, when he went to university after high school, which is where I met him, we ended up being roommates. And I tell you, living with someone from a totally different culture is one of the most interesting experiences ever, because it really makes you realize that we're so different culturally. But I think that's really cool. Like, I think it's fun to celebrate and learn about other cultures and stuff like that. But the big thing that I learned in living with him, and like, I'm obviously a native English speaker, I had no idea how messed up and irregular English was. I had no idea. And then I started thinking about it and thinking about, like, let's do a quick, this will be funny. So here's how screwed up. I'm just gonna increase, oh, come on. A little bit too big. Let's do that. So here's Ryan's English lesson for today. The OUGH sound. All right. All right, so tough. Plow. I think that's how you spell that. Trough. This one's also fairly similar. I would say like thought. I guess maybe thought. What's another good one? Is that what it is? I might have that one wrong. Pew. Thought, plow, trough. Those are the similar ones. What else do we have here? I gotta look this up really quickly now. This will be worth it, I promise. It'll be annoying, but... Yeah, here, let me just... Alright, so this is how insane and irregular English is. So we've got this one sound, or this one series of letters, O-U-G-H. And so we've got enough, hoff, I actually don't know these two words, slough, tough, cough, I don't know a lot of these words. Bow, drought, plow, furlough, brought, sought, thought, wrought, through, hiccup? No, that can't be right. Loch. Yeah, so that's like one series of letters and so many different interpretations, and I feel really, really bad for people learning English because it's such an irregular language, but I also think it's a beautiful language. That's enough random, confused banter. Thank you so much for joining me today. Really big plans for July. I'm going to be, of course, releasing part 2 of my Recycler Review, part 3 of my new Recycler Review 2017 tutorial series. GitHub down in the description box. I'm going to be rebuilding. I'm going to finish off POS Trainer, which is this architecture, and I'll build it with multiple different backends. Lots of tutorials, live content, great stuff like that. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful Sunday. Peace out.